Hello again. Thank you very much for joining me here on Movie Ninja. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the British psychological sci-fi thriller In the Earth by Ben Wheatley. And let's start these out as we have been. Let's see what the distributors describe this film as. As the world searches for a cure to a disastrous virus, a scientist and park scout venture deep into the forest for a routine equipment run. Through the night, their journey becomes a terrifying voyage through the heart of darkness, the forest coming to life around them. So, that is not... The description provided by the distributor would lead you to believe that this is something... Heart of Dark... This is in no way, shape, or form something that Joseph Conrad would come up with, or something that Francis Ford Coppola would derive inspiration from. So what happens is a scientist and a park scout are assigned to make an environmental check of this very fertile and verdant forest for possible usage by the British Interior Agriculture. I forget the name of the exact department, but essentially some department of the Interior is interested in this tract of land that is seemingly much more fertile than other parts of the country. So, okay, our two main characters, Martin and Alma, go into the forest during the night of their first campout. They are attacked. Unfortunately, the attacker leaves them confused, injured, and disoriented, and without shoes. Now, why would they do this? Okay, before I continue, as mentioned before, I am not an authority or a particular expert on the horror genre, but even I've seen enough horror films that happen in the woods to know that if you are attacked in the woods in these types of films, well, the first person that you're going to come across is probably not going to have your best interest at heart. Certainly not. Or heart, mind, or body. So the first person that they meet is an eccentric recluse living off of the land, scorning societies and urban living for the sake of getting back to nature. That's fine. You have homesteaders, you have people that embrace that way of life. That's fine. Oh, and by the way, this seemingly kind and compassionate person turns out not to be kind or compassionate. And through a brief but intense struggle against him, they do escape farther into the woods, where they meet a second individual, an individual that Martin has some history with, a scientist who has discovered an obelisk that possibly is showing some form of communicative intelligence, and initiating what I can really only call as pseudoscience. She conducts experiments with light and sound in order to possibly communicate with this standing stone. So, in these types of films, you have your wrong turns, you have your cabin in the woods sort of scenarios. If our main characters happen to escape the primary antagonist, and thankfully they meet someone who is obviously much more civilized and obviously is genuinely kind and compassionate, and in no way, shape, or form has any affiliation with the first antagonist. And can you pick up on the sarcasm that I'm throwing out there? This film, I really wish I could give it more credit. When I watched this film, I saw crumbs of interesting, original sci-fi, possibly horror, but everything about the film is lukewarm, unfortunately. I really cannot say too much in the positive about this. It's slow-paced, as mentioned, mostly through irony. It's predictable. And unfortunately, I really wish I didn't have to give it this distinction. It's boring. Predictable, slow-paced, and boring. You can be a lot. You can be a lot in your film, but whatever you do, you cannot be boring. So the main appeal that they were attempting, that I could see, is that through a scientist's attempts to communicate with a standing stone and communicate with the larger environment around herself, in conjunction with guidance from a pagan ritual manual, there were some possible interesting ideas at play. Unfortunately, they didn't manifest or mature in a way that was scary or entertaining. And I'll say this, something that I was hoping for, like, at least in some of the distribution material, almost half of the film includes scenes that would be very dangerous for people with photosensitivity. And nowhere in the distribution material before the film or anything like that do they give warning to at least part of their audience, I mean, we have closed captions for people who have hearing impaired. We have descriptive narration for people that may have, difficulty making out imagery. And for the most part, a lot of film studios and a lot of distributors, they put out warnings, for any type of material that may be dangerous for people who are photosensitive. So that they know in advance to possibly, not incur a seizure. As I mentioned, almost half of the film includes very bright and, for people that luckily, do not have those medical impairments, it's still distracting and annoying, to the point where I was just getting frustrated with the film at a certain degree. So, unrealized promise, slow pacing, a narrative that borders on pretentious, really, and just a lack of involvement for myself as an audience member. The film tries to prop itself up with several scenes of psychedelic imagery, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, it doesn't go to the levels of Beyond the Black Rainbow. It doesn't go to the surreal aspect of the director of Stalker, who... Please mention the name in the comments if you like. I have seen cerebral thrillers. I have seen psychedelic horror films before. And that's okay. I enjoy those because they bring a different depth and dimension to horror. But this one, no. Unfortunately, this is not really worth it. Not only that, as I mentioned, I was also very disappointed that they didn't give proper warning to members of the audience that might have photosensitivity, because this can go from a boring cinematic experience to a horrible medical trauma. Just in, I believe it's at the 35 minute mark, and then for the rest of the film, just lights flashing constantly. Like I said, the use of this gimmick as a means of kind of anchoring itself to a somewhat interesting premise is unfortunately fumbled. The performances, not really anything to brag about, very bland, unfortunately. I wish that this film lived up to the promises of the pull quotes, but then again, I guess call me a sucker, because I believed it. So this, as I mentioned, you can be a lot of things in your film. You cannot be boring. So I'm actually going to give this a 4 out of 10. One of the lowest scores that I've given a film in a very long time. So yes, that's my review of In the Earth. I strongly I advise against watching it. There's nothing over the top, gory or gratuitous or anything bad to it. That's not why. I think it just lacks fulfillment of its premise, and it's boring. So, sorry. Like I said at the beginning, they can't all be winners. That being said, I appreciate you watching this review. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did you think I was too harsh? Hey, just we may have to agree to disagree. If not, please ultimately be respectful. Thank you again for joining me for Movie Ninja, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.